The New York sky was heavy that Thursday afternoon, with grey clouds announcing the storm that would arrive in just a few hours. On the top floor of the Empire State Building, Emily Johnson watched the city through the panoramic window of her office. At 32, she had become the youngest director of innovation at Tech Vision, one of the largest technology companies in America. Her blue eyes reflected the restlessness of someone who needed to make an important decision by the end of the day. "Miss Johnson, the candidate for the senior developer position has arrived," her assistant announced through the intercom. Emily adjusted her grey blazer over her black dress and ran her hand through her perfectly aligned blonde hair in a bun. Her face, with delicate features but with a firm expression, demonstrated the seriousness with which she approached each interview. Tech Vision urgently needed someone who could lead the new artificial intelligence project, and she was determined to find the right talent. The candidate who entered through the office door was not what she expected. Michael Wilson, 30, wore a light blue dress shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows and dark jeans, a casual look by company standards. His slightly messy blonde hair and stubble contrasted with emerald green eyes that conveyed quiet confidence. He carried only a tablet and smiled in a way that seemed at odds with the typical nervousness of interviewees. "Good afternoon, Miss Johnson. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person," he said, extending his hand firmly. Emily greeted him formally, indicating the chair in front of her desk. "Your resume is unusual, Mr. Wilson," she began, consulting her computer screen. "Computer science degree from MIT, Masters in Artificial Intelligence from Stanford, creator of the Go Green app that was sold for $35 million 2 years ago. What brings you to a job interview when you clearly don't need one?" Michael smiled, revealing perfectly aligned teeth. "Money isn't everything, Miss Johnson. I could spend the rest of my life traveling the world or drinking margaritas at the beach, but that wouldn't fulfill me. Go Green was just the beginning of what I want to do with technology. Tech Vision has resources and reach that would allow me to develop something truly transformative." Emily raised an eyebrow. It was rare to find someone who, having achieved financial independence, still sought professional challenges with such determination. "And why should we hire you instead of leveraging your ideas as an investor or partner?" she questioned, leaning forward. "Because I don't just want to finance something. I want to get my hands dirty, program, solve problems, work in a team. Code is in my blood, and just watching others do the work would be like asking a painter to only buy other people's paintings." The sincerity in his response took her by surprise. In her years directing the innovation department, Emily had interviewed dozens of candidates, but few demonstrated genuine passion for the work like the man before her. The interview continued for almost 2 hours, far beyond the scheduled time. Michael answered technical questions with impressive precision and brought perspectives she hadn't considered for the company's challenges. What should have been a formality, since his track record spoke for itself, became a stimulating discussion about the future of technology. When her phone alarm indicated she was late for her next meeting, Emily realized she had lost track of time. "I believe we have enough for today, Mr. Wilson," she said, standing up. "Our HR team will be in touch in the coming days." "It was a pleasure, Miss Johnson," he replied with a sincere smile. "Regardless of the outcome, I appreciated our conversation." When the door closed behind Michael, Emily remained motionless for a few moments. There was something different about that candidate, something beyond his impressive credentials or captivating appearance, an authenticity she rarely found in the corporate world where she had grown up. Outside the building, the rain finally poured down on New York. Michael opened his umbrella and walked calmly toward the Times Square subway station, reflecting on the interview. He could easily call a private driver or take a taxi, but he preferred to blend into the flow of the city, observe people, feel the urban pulse that inspired him so much in his creations. What he didn't know was that this professional encounter would be just the beginning of a story that would completely change the course of his life, and that of the woman he had just met. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to meet someone who completely challenges your expectations? How would you react to discovering that a person with all the resources to live in comfort deliberately chooses to face challenges they could avoid? This is just the first piece of a puzzle that Emily and Michael began to put together, without knowing the final design that would form. Michael Wilson wasn't the typical millionaire. His apartment in Brooklyn, although spacious and well located, had minimalist and functional decor. There were no expensive artworks on the walls or designer furniture, just what was necessary to live comfortably, with an office equipped with the best available technology, where he spent most of his time. That Saturday morning, he was running in Central Park with headphones playing jazz, his favorite playlist for exercise. Sweat ran down his face as he maintained a steady pace, greeting with a nod the familiar faces he regularly saw in his morning routine. After the run, he stopped at a local bakery. "Hey, Michael, the usual?" asked Joe, the owner of the establishment, who had known him since he moved to the neighborhood 3 years ago. "Of course, Joe. That toasted bread with cream cheese and a latte to go," he replied with a smile, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a small towel. "You know you could buy the whole bakery if you wanted, right?" joked the older man as he prepared the order. Michael laughed. "And miss the pleasure of coming here every week? Never." This was one of the reasons he had chosen to maintain a low profile after the success of Go Green. Few knew that the young man who frequented local bars wearing band T-shirts and animatedly discussed football with neighbors was, in fact, one of the most successful programmers in the country. Go Green had started as a personal project, an app that connected people interested in sustainable practices, facilitating everything from recycling collections to ride-sharing and exchanges of used products. The simple idea grew exponentially when an American technology giant offered an astronomical amount for the software rights, recognizing its global potential. Suddenly, at 28, Michael found himself a millionaire. He bought the apartment, invested most of the money, and continued living almost as before, except for no longer having to worry about bills or accepting projects just for the payment. Now he could choose to work only on what he believed in. A few miles away, in the elegant Upper East Side neighborhood, Emily Johnson started her day completely differently. She woke up at 6 a.m., even on Saturday, and headed to the private gym installed in one of the rooms of her mansion. After an hour of exercises monitored by her personal trainer, she had a breakfast prepared by her private chef, a bowl of acai with gluten-free granola, poached eggs, and detox green juice. The only child of Edward Johnson, one of the largest investors in the American financial market, Emily had grown up surrounded by privileges, but also by expectations. She graduated in business and computer science from Harvard, and from an early age demonstrated talent for leading innovation teams. When her father decided to diversify the family's investments by entering the technology sector, it was natural for Emily to take over the directorship of the new venture. In just 4 years, she transformed TechVision into a national powerhouse, with offices in New York, San Francisco, and recently in Austin. "Your breakfast with the Williams ladies is confirmed for 11 a.m. at 11 Madison Park, miss," informed Lisa, her personal assistant, while Emily checked emails on her tablet. "Thank you, Lisa. Remind me to bring the partnership contract with the startup incubator to show them," she replied without taking her eyes off the screen. Emily rarely had moments of real rest. Even on weekends, she maintained a strategic social agenda, meeting potential investors or business partners. Lunch with the Williams ladies, matriarchs of a traditional farming family seeking to modernize their operations, was another business engagement disguised as social. The following hours proceeded as planned. Wearing an elegant cream skirt and blazer ensemble, with her blonde hair down in soft waves, Emily charmed the Williams. Ladies, at 11 Madison Park, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. With her natural networking ability, she managed to close a preliminary agreement to develop monitoring systems for the family's farms. Meanwhile, across town, Michael was participating in a programmers' meetup in Williamsburg. At the informal event organized in a trendy cafe, young developers discussed new languages and shared personal projects. There, he was just another technology enthusiast, not the millionaire, who had created Go Green. "Man, your algorithm for route optimization is brilliant," commented a young man of approximately 22 years, analyzing the code that Michael had just shared on his laptop screen. "Thanks, Ryan. It still has some bugs, but the main idea works. If you want to help me improve it, that would be awesome," replied Michael, taking a sip of his pour-over coffee. It was this type of interaction that nourished him, the genuine exchange of knowledge without hierarchies or formalities. Although he had the means to frequent the same exclusive circles as Emily, he deliberately chose environments where ideas mattered, not bank balances. At the end of that Saturday afternoon, the seemingly parallel paths of Emily and Michael almost crossed. She was driving her BMW convertible down Fifth Avenue, returning from a quick visit to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, while he walked along the same avenue after leaving the meetup in Williamsburg, admiring the street artists performing near Washington Square Park. They were less than 10 meters apart, she inside the car with closed windows, focused on an important call. He absorbed watching a saxophonist playing "The Girl from Ipanema" with a unique interpretation. Two very different people with contrasting values and lifestyles, connected only by a brief professional encounter days before and by the pulsating city they both called home. What would happen if these worlds really collided, beyond the formalities of a job interview? What would you do if you had Michael's financial resources? Would you maintain a simple lifestyle like him, or take advantage to enjoy all possible luxury? And if you were in Emily's position, could you separate personal relationships from professional and strategic ones? Monday arrived with New York's typical morning chaos. The sky, still dark at 6:30 a.m., witnessed the gradual awakening of the metropolis. Emily was already in her third commitment of the day, a video conference with Japanese partners, when her assistant interrupted her with an urgent message. The company's technical director had suffered a car accident on the way to work. Nothing serious, fortunately, but he would be away for a few weeks. "The AI system prototype needs to be presented to investors in 10 days, and we're without technical leadership," she commented with concern to the HR director, who was in her office discussing emergency solutions. "We need to accelerate the hiring of that developer." "I interviewed last week," decided Emily, immediately remembering Michael. "Contact him today, offer attractive conditions, but make it clear we need an immediate response." Meanwhile, Michael was enjoying a quiet morning in his home office, working on a personal facial recognition project for people with visual impairments. The ring of his cell phone interrupted his concentration. "Hello, Michael Wilson speaking." "Mr. Wilson, this is Rachel from Tech Vision HR. We have an urgent proposal to discuss. Miss Johnson has requested that we contact you immediately." The call was brief and direct. The company offered not only the senior developer position, but a temporary role as an interim technical director with the possibility of permanent employment depending on the results. The salary, although irrelevant for someone with his resources, was impressively generous. "Can we schedule a meeting to discuss the details this afternoon?" asked the recruiter. Michael hesitated for a moment. Taking on such responsibility would mean postponing his personal projects and diving headfirst into the corporate culture from which he deliberately kept his distance. On the other hand, it was an opportunity to directly impact an important project with resources and a team he wouldn't have working alone. "I'll be there at 2 p.m., he finally replied. The Tech Vision building, located near Wall Street in the heart of New York's financial district, was an impressive structure of glass and steel. On down the 15th floor, Emily anxiously waited, reviewing documents detailing the artificial intelligence project that needed to be saved. When Michael entered her office, she noticed that he maintained the same casual style as during the interview, this time with a light green shirt that highlighted his eyes and dark jeans. He completely contrasted with the executives in suits and ties circulating through the company corridors. "I appreciate the offer and the vote of confidence," he began after initial greetings, "but I need to understand exactly what I'm taking on before accepting." Emily appreciated the frankness. Instead of trying to impress him with the prestige of the position or the salary offered, she went straight to the point. "We're developing an artificial intelligence system for supply chain optimization that could revolutionize logistics in America. We've managed to attract important investors, but we need to present a functional prototype in 10 days. Our technical director is temporarily away, and you're the most qualified person we've found." She slid a folder with confidential information about the project toward him. "Why me? You have hundreds of talented developers," questioned Michael as he leafed through the documents with growing interest. Emily hesitated for a moment, considering whether she should be completely honest. "Because you don't need this job," she finally answered. "That means you won't accept the position just for the salary or status. If you accept, it will be because you believe in the project, and we need someone who truly cares about the outcome." The answer surprised Michael. It was the first time his financial situation was presented as a professional advantage and not as a curiosity or reason for distrust. After 2 hours discussing technical details, challenges, and deadlines, he made his decision. "I accept, with one condition." Emily raised her eyebrows, waiting. "I want real autonomy to implement changes to the project if I consider it necessary, even if that means rethinking part of the architecture already developed." It was a bold request for someone who hadn't even started, but Emily surprised herself by responding almost immediately. "Deal. But you'll report directly to me, and we'll discuss any significant changes together." They shook hands, sealing an agreement that neither of them imagined would change their lives. The following days were of total immersion. Michael arrived before everyone and left after most, analyzing every line of code, meeting with the technical team, and redesigning critical parts of the system. His approach was different from the usual at the company, less hierarchical, more collaborative. Instead of giving orders, he worked side by side with junior programmers, teaching and learning simultaneously. Emily, who normally delegated supervision of technical projects, found herself inexplicably drawn to the development lab. She told herself it was just concern about meeting the deadline, but there was something more, a curiosity about the way that peculiar man led and transformed the energy of the entire team. On Thursday night, when almost everyone had already gone home, Emily passed by the lab and found Michael still working, surrounded by 3 monitors displaying complex codes, a half-eaten pizza, and several energy drink cans. "You should rest a bit," she said, leaning against the door. Michael looked up from the screens, surprised by the director's presence at that hour. "Just a few more adjustments to the learning algorithm. We're almost there." Emily approached to observe the screens. The numbers and codes meant nothing to her, despite her education, including basic programming notions. "Explain it to me as if I were 5 years old," she asked, pulling up a chair. To her surprise, Michael smiled with genuine enthusiasm. He took a napkin and began drawing simple diagrams, translating complex machine learning concepts into everyday analogies. Emily found herself completely absorbed in the explanation, asking questions and truly understanding the beauty of what was being created. An hour passed without them noticing. When they finally looked at the clock, it was already past midnight. "My driver must be impatient," commented Emily, getting up. Driver? I thought everyone had gone home. I have a 24-hour driver, she explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Seeing Michael's expression, she added, "Privileged, I know." "I don't judge," he replied with a light smile. "I just choose differently. I'll take the subway." "The subway doesn't run anymore at this hour," she observed. "Uber, then," he shrugged. Emily hesitated for a moment, then offered, "I can give you a ride. You live in Brooklyn, right? It's not far from my way." The offer surprised them both. It was completely outside protocol. Directors didn't give rides to employees, even temporary ones. There was a hierarchy to be maintained. But something that night, perhaps fatigue, perhaps the unexpected connection during the technical explanation, had temporarily dissolved professional barriers. "If it's not a bother, I accept," replied Michael, turning off the monitors. The journey in Emily's luxury BMW was initially silent. The driver, discreet as he had been trained, pretended not to notice the unusual presence of an additional passenger. "You really understand the potential of this project, don't you?" asked Emily, breaking the silence. "It's more than a logistics system," he replied, looking at the city lights through the window. "If implemented correctly, it can significantly reduce food waste in transport, optimize routes reducing carbon emissions, and make essential products more accessible in remote regions. Most people just see the profit potential. Profit will come as a consequence of doing something that really matters," he said with quiet conviction. When the car stopped in front of Michael's building, there was a moment of hesitation. "Thank you for the ride and for trusting in the project," he said, extending his hand. Emily shook it, feeling a connection that went beyond professional. "Until tomorrow, then." She watched as he walked to the entrance of the building, a solitary figure on the deserted sidewalk. Something had changed that night, a subtle shift in the dynamic between them. What had begun as a strictly professional relationship now contained indefinable elements that neither was prepared to name. If you were in Emily's place, could you keep the relationship strictly professional after getting to know Michael better? And if you were Michael, would you accept working in a rigid corporate structure, even having the financial freedom to develop your own projects? Sunday dawned sunny in New York, a precious rarity amid the grey routine of the metropolis. Michael took advantage of the free day to visit the Union Square Farmers Market, one of his favorite weekend programs. Wearing shorts, a t-shirt and flip-flops, he blended perfectly with the relaxed crowd circulating among the colorful stalls. "Hey, Michael! Been missing, huh?" greeted Joe, a family farmer from upstate New York who always reserved the best vegetables for his regular customers. "Yeah, Joe, I picked up a new project that's been consuming all my time," he replied, selecting a bunch of kale and some organic carrots. "New job? I thought you were set after selling that app." Michael smiled. "Let's say it's a challenge worth taking on." After completing his shopping and talking with some known producers, he decided to have coffee in the food area of the market. With his eco-bag full of fresh fruits and vegetables, he sat at one of the rustic wooden tables and ordered a country breakfast, cornbread, bagel, and drip coffee. That's when he saw something, or rather someone, completely unexpected. Emily Johnson, wearing sunglasses and a light patterned dress, examining products at a nearby stall. Without the formal attire and corporate environment, she seemed like another person, more relaxed, more accessible, almost unrecognizable to those who only knew her in the role of relentless executive. Michael hesitated. Would it be appropriate to greet her outside of work? Before he could decide, she turned in his direction, and despite the dark glasses, he perceived the exact moment when she recognized him. For an instant, he thought she would pretend not to have seen him, but to his surprise, Emily walked directly to his table. "Michael, what a coincidence," she said, removing her glasses and revealing those intense blue eyes he had already noticed during their interactions at the company. "Good morning, Emily. I didn't expect to find you here," he replied, standing up by reflex. "I come almost every Sunday," she explained. "It's my little secret, and one of the few activities where I can completely disconnect from work. Hard to imagine you. Shopping in person, having a team that could do it for you." Emily smiled. "Some things we need to choose with our own hands," she replied, showing her own bag containing exotic fruits and a jar of wildflower honey. "Besides, I love talking to the producers, learning the stories behind what we consume." There was a brief silence, both realizing they were seeing a side of each other that remained hidden in the work environment. "Would you like to join me?" offered Michael, indicating the empty chair across from him. "They make the best bagels in the city here." To his surprise, Emily accepted the invitation. Seated at the simple table, under the sun filtered through the trees of the square, she seemed much younger and more relaxed. "So, how's the project going?" she asked after placing her order. "I thought we wouldn't talk about work," he teased with a smile. "Force of habit," she admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "Let's try again. What do you usually do on Sundays besides buying organic vegetables?" The conversation flowed with unexpected ease. They discovered common interests in jazz and independent cinema. Emily told about her secret passion for analog photography, a hobby that few knew about. Michael talked about his side project teaching programming to underprivileged youth in the Bronx. "Why have you never mentioned this at the company?" she asked, genuinely interested in the social project. "Some things we do for recognition, others for meaning," he replied, simply. "Not everything needs to become a corporate success case or appear in a social responsibility report." The observation, although without a tone of criticism, made Emily reflect. How much of what she did was out of conviction and how much was for the expectation of visible and measurable results? They walked together through the market after coffee, occasionally stopping to taste products or chat with exhibitors. Emily was surprised by Michael's knowledge about organic farming and his familiarity with the producers. He, in turn, admired her genuine curiosity about cultivation methods and the stories of families maintaining agricultural traditions. "You're a box of surprises, Miss Johnson," he commented as they tasted honey from different flowers. "Emily," she corrected. "Here I'm just Emily." The moment had something liberating about it. Outside the roles of director and employee, they were just two people enjoying a sunny morning and discovering unexpected affinities. When they said goodbye, a few hours later, there was a new quality in the relationship between them, something that could not be easily categorized or ignored when they returned to the formal environment of the company. "See you tomorrow, Emily," said Michael, testing the newly established intimacy. "See you tomorrow," she replied with a discreet smile, putting her sunglasses back on as she walked toward the parking lot where her driver waited. On Monday, the dynamic at TechVision had subtly changed. When they met in the morning meeting with the entire team, they maintained professionalism, but there were glances and half-words that carried meanings comprehensible only to them. The project advanced at an accelerated pace. Michael's innovative approach had energized the entire team, and even the most skeptical programmers were beginning to believe they could meet the impossible deadline. That afternoon, Emily did something unusual. She appeared at the development lab without prior notice and suggested that Michael accompany her for coffee on the building's rooftop. The space, normally reserved for meetings with important clients, offered a panoramic view of New York. "We need to discuss some changes to the schedule," she justified as they rode up in the executive elevator. On the terrace, with the city stretching to the horizon and the wind slightly messing up their hair, the conversation began professionally, but soon drifted to more personal topics. They talked about books, movies, and travel experiences. Michael told about his backpacking trip through Southeast Asia after selling the app. Emily shared memories of her academic exchange in Boston. I've always wondered what it would be like to travel without an itinerary, without five-star hotels booked in advance, she confessed, leaning on the wall that surrounded the terrace. I can guarantee that sleeping in a hostel with 8 other people snoring has its charm, he joked, drawing a genuine laugh from Emily, a sound rarely heard in the corporate corridors of TechVision. What had begun as a brief break extended for almost 2 hours. When they finally returned to work, something had changed between them. Not just the way they saw each other, but how they allowed themselves to be seen by the other. In the following days, accidental encounters in the company cafeteria and extended meetings became frequent. Always maintaining the appearance of professionalism, they were increasingly aware of the growing attraction between them. On the eve of presenting the prototype to investors, the team worked late. Around 11 p.m., only Michael and Emily remained in the lab, finalizing the last details of the demonstration. "We did it," he finally announced, leaning back in his chair with evident exhaustion and satisfaction. "The system is working perfectly." Emily approached to observe the results on the main monitor. She stood next to Michael, so close that she could feel the heat of his body and the slight aroma of his cologne, mixed with the smell of strong coffee. "It's amazing what you accomplished in such a short time," she said, genuinely impressed. "What we accomplished," he corrected, turning to face her. The moment that followed seemed suspended in time. Their gazes met, and for an instant, all the differences between them, status, lifestyles, worldviews, seemed insignificant in the face of the connection they had developed. Michael stood up slowly, further reducing the distance between them. Emily didn't back away. In an almost imperceptible movement, he lightly touched her hand. A simple gesture that carried an implicit question. "This is a terrible idea," she murmured, though without moving her hand away. "I completely agree," he replied with a half-smile. The kiss that followed was inevitable, like the meeting of 2 universes that, against all odds, had found a point of convergence. Have you ever found yourself completely attracted to someone so different from you? Someone who, under normal circumstances, you would never consider as a partner? How would you handle the tension between personal attraction and professional relationships in a work environment? The presentation to investors was a resounding success. The prototype worked impeccably, and Michael's clear and passionate explanation about the transformative potential of the system won over even the most skeptical investors. At the end of the meeting, TechVision had secured the necessary funding to implement the project on a national scale. "Champagne for everyone," announced Emily's father, Edward Johnson, who rarely appeared at the company but had made a point of being present on that special occasion. Tall, blonde, and with the same penetrating gaze as his daughter, he was an imposing figure in the business world. At the cocktail that followed, Emily and Michael kept their distance from each other, exchanging only discreet glances over champagne flutes. What had happened the night before hovered between them like an unanswered question. "So you're the famous millionaire programmer who saved our project," approached Edward, unexpectedly approaching Michael. "Emily has told me a lot about your work." "I hope good things," replied Michael with a polite smile, shaking the older man's hand. "Certainly. She rarely praises anyone with such enthusiasm." Edward studied Michael with interest. "Curious. Your choice to work for others when you could be managing your own investments." "I prefer creating to managing, Mr. Johnson." Edward nodded, as if evaluating a rare piece. "People like you are valuable, Wilson. I hope you'll consider a permanent position at the company." Before Michael could respond, they were interrupted by a group of investors who wished to know better the genius behind the algorithm, as one of them referred to Michael. When he finally got a moment of privacy, Emily approached discreetly. "My father seems to have liked you," she commented, quietly. "Is that a good sign?" "Depends. He's either seeing you as a valuable asset for the company or as a potential threat to his plans." Michael raised his eyebrows. "And what would those plans be?" Emily hesitated. Can we talk about this later? I have a proposal for you, but not here. They arranged to meet later that day. Michael suggested a small restaurant in Greenwich Village, far from the circuits frequented by Emily's social circle. The village bistro was an unpretentious establishment with wooden tables, walls decorated with old photos of New York, and a menu that favored American home cooking. Michael was already waiting at a table in the back when Emily arrived, wearing jeans, a simple blouse, and hair tied in a ponytail, a deliberately discreet look. "I love this place," she commented, observing the welcoming environment. "How have I never heard of it before?" "Because it doesn't appear on lists of trendy restaurants or have Michelin stars," replied Michael, with a smile. "But the Saturday BBQ has lines around the block." They ordered 2 craft beers and appetizers to start. The conversation flowed naturally, initially avoiding the subject that hovered between them. "About last night," Emily finally began, distractedly spinning her beer glass. "If you're going to say it was a mistake, we can skip that part," Michael gently interrupted. "I've already imagined all the rational arguments against. We're professionally incompatible, and technically my boss. We live in different worlds." "Actually," she interrupted him with a shy smile, "I was going to say that it was the most spontaneous and genuine thing I've done in a long time." The confession took Michael by surprise. He extended his hand across the table, lightly touching her fingers. "So, what's this mysterious proposal you mentioned?" he asked, changing the subject to give them both a moment to process the declaration. Emily took a deep breath. "I want you to permanently assume the technical directorship of Tech Vision." It wasn't what he expected to hear. "Emily, you know I accepted the temporary position due to specific circumstances. I'm not looking for an executive position." "Listen first," she insisted. "What you did in 2 weeks was extraordinary. You not only solved technical problems, but transformed the team culture. People are motivated, collaborative, producing results they never achieved before. That's temporary. Teams usually get energized with novelties. It's not just that. You bring a perspective we desperately need, someone who cares about the real impact of technology, not just numbers and success metrics." She paused, carefully choosing her next words. "And selfishly, I want to continue working with you." Michael studied her face, trying to decipher how much of that request was professional and how much was personal. "There's something else you're not telling me," he stated. Emily sighed. "My father is pushing to transform Tech Vision into a publicly traded company. If that happens, all decisions will be guided exclusively by quarterly financial results. Projects with significant social impact but long-term financial return will be the first to be cut. And how would my presence change that? With you in technical command, backed by the success of this project and your market reputation, we would have solid arguments to maintain the focus on innovations that really matter." She paused. "Besides, you're financially independent. You can't be pressured or bought." "That's very calculating of you," observed Michael, though without a tone of accusation. "I'm an executive, Michael. I was trained to think strategically." She intertwined her fingers with his. "But I'm also a woman who's beginning to fall in love with someone who makes me question everything I considered important." The raw honesty of the declaration completely disarmed him. "I need to think," he finally replied. "It's a big decision that would completely affect my plans." "I understand. No pressure." They continued dinner, talking about lighter subjects, but the proposal hovered in the air, loaded with both professional and personal implications. At the end of the night, Michael accompanied Emily to the taxi she had called. She had dismissed her private driver for that discreet meeting. "Can I ask you a personal question?" she asked, hesitant. "Sure. Why does someone with your resources choose to live so?" "Simply," Michael reflected for a moment before answering, "my parents were public school teachers in Boston. We lived modestly but never lacked the essentials. They taught me that true wealth is in experiences, knowledge, authentic relationships. He paused, choosing his words. When Go Green was sold and the money came in, I realized I could buy practically anything, but the things that really made me happy continued to be the same as before. Emily absorbed the response in silence. For her, raised in a world where status and appearances were always priorities, that perspective was simultaneously alien and fascinating. "Good night, Michael," she said finally, leaning in for a brief and sweet kiss. "Good night, Emily." As he watched the taxi drive away, Michael realized he was at a crossroads in his life. Accepting the proposal would mean committing to something much bigger than a job. It would be diving into a corporate world he had always avoided, and more significantly, deepening a relationship with someone whose life was diametrically opposed to his. The next morning, he received an unexpected message from Emily. "Dinner at my parents' house tomorrow. They insist on meeting the genius who saved the project. It's not a trap, I promise. E." The prospect of a formal dinner with the Johnson family, one of the most influential in New York's business circle, was intimidating even for someone who wasn't easily impressed by power and money. Michael responded with humor. "Should I bring my three-piece suit and memorize the correct order of cutlery?" The response came almost immediately. "Be yourself. That's what won me over. E." The implicit confession in the text made him smile. Whatever his decision about the professional proposal, one thing was certain. What he felt for Emily transcended any rational calculation of compatibility or convenience. The dinner at the Johnsons' mansion in the Hamptons was a surreal experience for Michael. The impressive property, with meticulously cared-for gardens and a main house that seemed straight out of an architecture magazine, reflected the power and wealth of its owners. Edward and Sarah Johnson received him with studied courtesy. The patriarch, in his element, conducted the initial conversation with insightful questions about technology and the market. Emily's mother, a former model who maintained the elegance of her runway days, observed Michael with barely disguised curiosity. "Emily told us about your unusual trajectory," commented Sarah during dinner, served by silent staff in a dining room almost the size of Michael's entire apartment. "It must be liberating to have success so young." "It depends on what we consider success, Mrs. Johnson," he replied politely. "Financially, I was lucky, but I feel that I still have much to accomplish in terms of positive impact." Edward intervened. "Speaking of which, Emily mentioned that you're considering our offer to permanently assume the technical directorship." Michael shot a quick glance at Emily, who seemed slightly uncomfortable with her father's direct approach. "I'm evaluating the proposal, yes. It's a significant decision. Tech vision could greatly benefit from someone with your vision," continued Edward, studying Michael's reaction. "Although I confess that your minimalist lifestyle intrigues me. Most people in your financial position would be investing in yachts or collecting sports cars." "Dad," Emily gently warned. "It's a valid observation," conceded Michael with a calm smile. "I believe that each person finds satisfaction in different choices. For some, it's material possessions. For others, experiences or purpose." "And for you?" asked Sarah, genuinely interested. "Doing something that matters, creating technology that improves real lives. And as for lifestyle, well, I grew up in a home where simplicity was valued. Old habits are hard to change." The direct and unpretentious response seemed to impress even Edward, who nodded slightly as if reassessing the young man before him. The rest of the dinner proceeded with lighter conversations. Michael noticed how Emily seemed different in that environment, more restrained, calculating each word, as if performing a carefully rehearsed role. After dessert, Edward invited Michael to see his collection of American art in a specially climate-controlled room. It was clearly a tactic for a private conversation. "I'll be direct, Wilson," said Edward, when they were alone among valuable paintings by modern artists. "I noticed something between you and my daughter. that goes beyond professional. Michael maintained his composure, although surprised by the approach. "Emily is an extraordinary woman," he replied cautiously. "Yes, she is, and she has a future mapped out ahead of the international expansion of our business." Edward stared at him intensely. "Relationships are potential complicators for this type of trajectory. Distractions can be costly. With all due respect, Mr. Johnson, Emily is perfectly capable of defining her own priorities." Edward smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Naturally, I'm just contextualizing the situation. You have a romantic view of the world, Wilson. I admire that sincerely, but our universe operates with different rules." Before Michael could respond, Emily joined them, as if she had sensed the need to interrupt that conversation. On the way out, while waiting for the valet service to bring Michael's simple but comfortable car, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicle fleet of the family, Emily approached. "Sorry about that," she murmured. "My father can be intense." "He's just protecting what he values," replied Michael. "I can understand that. What did he say when you were alone?" "Basically, that I could be a distraction in your brilliant career," he replied with a half-smile. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, visibly annoyed. "He has no right to interfere in my personal life." "Are you sure about that? It seems your entire life has been carefully planned by him." The observation, although made without aggression, touched a sensitive point. Emily remained silent for a few moments. "It's complicated," she said finally. "I have responsibilities, expectations to fulfill. I can't simply ignore all that." Michael nodded, understanding. "That's why I haven't answered your proposal yet. We need to be clear about what we really want, professionally and personally." The car arrived, interrupting the moment. With Emily's parents discreetly observing from the entrance, the farewell was formal, a handshake and polite smiles. "Talk tomorrow?" she asked, with a vulnerability in her eyes that contrasted with her confident posture. "Definitely," he promised, getting into the car. During the journey back to his apartment, Michael reflected on the surreal night. The contrast between his world and Emily's was even more pronounced than he had imagined. They weren't just different lifestyles. They were worldviews, values, and expectations that seemed fundamentally incompatible. And yet, there was something undeniable between them. Something that defied rational explanations and compatibility calculations. If you were in Michael's place, would you accept the permanent job offer, knowing it would put you in a corporate world with values potentially conflicting with yours? And what about the relationship with Emily? Is it worth pursuing a connection when your worlds are so different? Michael spent the weekend isolated in his apartment, carefully evaluating Emily's proposal and the implications of his growing relationship with her. On Sunday night, after hours of reflection, he made his decision. On Monday, he arrived earlier than usual at TechVision. He needed to organize his thoughts before talking to Emily. To his surprise, he found her already in her office, reviewing documents with a concentrated expression. "Good morning," he greeted. Hesitating at the door, Emily looked up, a smile lighting up her tired face. "You came. I thought we had a pending conversation." She nodded, indicating the chair in front of her desk. For a moment, neither spoke, as if measuring the weight of the words they were about to exchange. "I refused your father's offer," said Michael finally. Emily's expression revealed disappointment and confusion. "Why?" "I thought, I can't accept being permanent technical director," he explained, "but I proposed an alternative. I can act as an external consultant for the AI project, with freedom to implement the methodologies I've developed and train your team to eventually take over completely." "Consultant? But that would mean that I won't be here every day." "Yes," he completed. "It would be a more flexible arrangement, allowing me to continue developing my personal projects while contributing to TechVision." Emily slowly absorbed the information, processing the implications. And what about us? Michael leaned forward, holding her hands across the desk. That's the complicated part. The dinner with your parents made evident something we already suspected. Our worlds are drastically different. So you're ending what barely began? She asked, her voice controlled but with contained emotion. On the contrary, he replied, I'm proposing that we explore this outside the complications of a boss-subordinate relationship. As two people discovering if they can build something meaningful, despite the differences. Emily studied his face, seeking to fully understand what was being proposed. Do you really think we can make this work, with such different worlds? I don't know, admitted Michael with honesty, but I think it's worth trying. He paused. Or would you prefer to follow the path carefully traced by your father? The question was direct, almost provocative. Emily leaned back in her chair, reflecting. My entire life has been defined by expectations from my family, shareholders, the market. I've always been the perfect daughter, the exemplary executive, fulfilling every established goal. She took a deep breath. But in the last few days, working with you, seeing your very different approach, I began to question if this path still makes sense for me. And what was your conclusion? Instead of responding verbally, Emily stood up, circled the desk, and in a gesture that would surprise any employee who entered at that moment, kissed Michael softly. Does that answer your question? She murmured, moving away just enough to look into his eyes. With crystal clarity, he smiled. In the following weeks, Tech Vision witnessed significant changes. The new arrangement proposed by Michael was implemented. He came to the company twice a week as a consultant, leading the development of the AI system and training the internal team. On other days, he worked on his personal projects, including an educational app for public schools. Emily, in turn, began to redefine her own approach to leadership. Inspired by Michael's vision of technology with purpose, she proposed to the board a new investment policy in social impact projects, facing for the first time significant resistance from her father. I don't recognize your priorities anymore, commented Edward during a tense board meeting. This fixation with social impact may be admirable, but our investors expect results, and they will have them, replied Emily with firmness that surprised even herself. But we're going to stop thinking only about the next quarter and start planning the next 10 years. Sustainable and inclusive technology is not just morally right, it's the future of the market. The determination with which she defended her vision impressed even the most conservative directors. By the end of that month, the board approved, albeit reluctantly, her proposal to allocate 15% of the company's annual investments for technology projects focused on solving social and environmental problems. Meanwhile, the relationship between Emily and Michael flourished outside the corporate environment. To the surprise of both, the differences that initially seemed insurmountable became a source of mutual growth. Michael introduced Emily to experiences she would never consider, from eating street food and riding the subway at peak hours to participating in community tree planting efforts in the Bronx. She, in turn, showed him how to navigate with ease in environments of power and influence, where decisions affecting millions were made. On a Saturday afternoon, 3 months after the beginning of their relationship, they walked hand in hand through Central Park when Emily made an unexpected confession. I'm thinking about temporarily stepping away from Tech Vision. Michael stopped, surprised. What do you mean? I want to better understand this other world that you've shown me, work directly with communities, understand in practice the impact of the technologies we develop. She smiled, simultaneously anxious and excited. Maybe spend a few months with that NGO that implements technological solutions in public schools. Your father will have a heart attack, commented Michael, although his eyes shone with pride. Probably, she agreed, but for the first time, I'm making a decision based on what I want. not what is expected of me. 2 months later, the prestigious Fortune magazine published a cover story titled "The New Face of American Technology," highlighting the innovative partnership between Emily Johnson, now TechVision's social projects coordinator, and Michael Wilson, the minimalist millionaire, as the press liked to call him. The report detailed how the couple was redefining the corporate approach to innovation, prioritizing solutions that combined sustainability, inclusion, and commercial viability. The pilot artificial intelligence project for logistics optimization, now implemented in 3 states, already demonstrated impressive results in reducing waste of food and medicines. On a sunny Sunday morning, a year after their first meeting at the Union Square Farmers Market, Emily and Michael returned to the location. They walked among the stalls, greeting family producers who already knew them when they stopped to taste a new organic honey. "Have you thought about where we would be if you hadn't shown up for that interview?" asked Emily, intertwining her fingers with his. "Probably I would be. Programming alone in my apartment, and you implacably commanding TechVision, making your father proud," he joked. "And we both would miss the chance to discover an entire world beyond our bubbles," she completed. Michael smiled, pulling her closer. "You know what I learned from you this year? That sometimes we need to completely leave our comfort zone to discover who we really are. And I learned that success isn't measured by the size of the bank account or position, but by the positive impact we generate," she replied, leaning in for a gentle kiss. In that simple moment amid the bustle of the Sunday market, 2 worlds that seemed incompatible had found not just coexistence, but a transformative harmony. Emily had discovered purpose beyond family expectations. Michael had found a partner who shared his vision, even coming from a completely different reality. And New York, the city that never sleeps, silently witnessed one more of its infinite stories of reinvention and new beginnings. This time, through 2 hearts that dared to challenge conventions and expectations to write, together, a new code for their lives. If you were in Emily's or Michael's place, would you have the courage to challenge expectations and social conventions to follow what your heart indicates? How would you balance differences in background and worldviews in a relationship? This story reminds us that some of the most transformative connections happen precisely between people from seemingly incompatible worlds. What do you think?